In places that are supposed to be all about healing and support, there's this really fine line between providing care and imposing control. Today, we're going to explore what happens when that balance gets thrown off. We're diving into restrictive practices and why getting a handle on them is so important for protecting basic human dignity. Wow, humiliation, fear, and a loss of trust. Those are some really heavy words. And they're definitely not words you'd ever want to associate with a place of care, right? But the thing is, this is exactly what people have reported feeling. It's the real emotional fallout from some of these practices. So it really makes you wonder, how? How can a place designed for safety and support end up making people feel this way? Well, the answer lies in a set of actions we call restrictive practices. So let's break it down. A restrictive practice is basically any action that limits a person's rights or their freedom to move. Now, the intention is often to keep someone safe, to prevent harm. But the risks? They can be massive. To really get what this means, we're going to walk through the 5 main ways these practices show up. Okay, first up, we've got one of the most common and maybe one of the most misunderstood forms. And that's using medication not just for treatment, but as a way to restrain someone. This is called chemical restraint. The key word here is intent. This isn't about giving medication to treat a diagnosed illness. This is about using drugs specifically to control a person's behavior. Think about it like this. An elderly person with dementia is agitated. Instead of trying to figure out why they're upset, they're just given a sedative to quiet them down. That's chemical restraint. And that's where the problem is so huge. The risks of this approach are really serious. We're talking everything from heavy sedation and dangerous falls to completely masking the real problem, which could be something as simple as untreated pain. But on the flip side, the alternatives are so much more compassionate. Things like music therapy or just taking a moment to figure out what's triggering the distress. These things aren't just safer, they actually address what the person truly needs. All right, next we're moving into 2 types of restraint that are a lot more direct. They're all about physically stopping a person from moving, and they are physical and mechanical restraints. Physical restraint is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. It's when a person, or maybe a group of people, uses their own bodies to control someone else's movement. For example, a caregiver holding down a person's arms to stop them from hurting themselves. And while, sometimes people see it as a last-ditch safety effort, it comes at a really high price. The risks here aren't just the obvious physical ones, like bruises or even broken bones. The psychological damage, that complete loss of trust in the very people who are supposed to be caring for you, that can be absolutely devastating. And this is why alternatives like calm, de-escalation techniques or creating a simple distraction are so incredibly powerful. They build trust instead of shattering it. So mechanical restraint is similar, but instead of a person, it's a device that's doing the restraining. We're talking about things like lap belts on wheelchairs or bed rails that are put up specifically to keep someone from getting out of bed. It's really important to draw a line here. This is different from equipment that's used for therapy, like a cast on a broken arm. And the dangers here can be kind of sneaky. Being physically held down by a device can lead to awful things like pressure sores, muscle wasting away, and just profound anxiety. But again, there are so many better, smarter ways to handle this. You can adapt the environment with things like fall prevention mats or sensor alarms that provide safety without stripping away a person's dignity. So, just to be super clear on the difference here, physical restraint relies on human force. Mechanical restraint relies on a device. One is personal, the other is impersonal. But at the end of the day, the result is the same. A person's freedom has been taken away. Okay, the last 2 types of restraint we're going to talk about are a little different. They're less about direct physical force and more about controlling a person's surroundings and their contact with other people. You can almost think of them as invisible walls. So, environmental restraint is exactly that. It's like building invisible walls. The classic example is locking the doors to a care home to stop residents from what they call wandering. And yeah, it might seem like a straightforward safety measure, but what it actually does is turn a person's home into a prison. And you can imagine the impact. It leads to this deep frustration, it can cause social isolation, and it just completely strips away a person's sense of independence. The better way involves smarter, more thoughtful design, like creating secure outdoor spaces that are still open and accessible. It's all about balancing safety with freedom. And finally, we have seclusion. This is probably the most extreme form of restraint there is, locking someone up alone in a room or a space that they literally cannot leave. It's usually something you see in acute mental health settings when someone is having a really severe behavioral crisis.
The deepest risk here is trauma. For someone who is already in crisis, being completely isolated can feel like abandonment, and it can make the whole situation so much worse. A therapeutic approach, like a calming conversation, or just offering a comforting sensory item, is almost always the more healing choice.
Okay, so we've walked through all the different ways that control can manifest. Now for the most important part. What does choosing care actually look like? How do we start moving away from control and move towards real human connection? So, what does better care look like in the real world? It's not about trying to get rid of every single risk. That's impossible. It's about finding more humane and, frankly, more effective ways to support people. You know, when you lay all 5 of these practices out side by side, a really clear pattern starts to show. In every single case, the goal of control comes with these huge risks, from physical injury and trauma to just deep isolation. And in every single case, the alternative is always rooted in the same things: communication, understanding, and adapting to the person's individual needs. It really just boils down to these 3 things. First, always put communication and de-escalation first. Second, remember that every single person is different, so you have to create care plans that are actually tailored to them. And third, change the environment to meet their needs instead of forcing them to fit into a restrictive space. And that really leaves us with this one final crucial question. In every single decision that's made for people who are vulnerable, a choice is being made. Is it going to be a choice that prioritizes control just because it's easier? Or is it going to be one that upholds the fundamental dignity of that human being? The answer to that question, well, it defines the very meaning of care.